Hello there. I had not intended to prepare any presentations on motivation or discipline for this channel. This is because I come from the psychological tradition, and in this tradition, as we move from subjects that have a single definition and concrete, physical, measurable manifestations of that definition, like sleep, where everybody understands that it's a state of reduced arousal, where we're recovering, and that we see reduced heart rate, reduced sensitivity to things like noise, paralysis of many muscles in the body during REM sleep. And if we hook you up to an EEG machine, we'll see changes in the frequency of your brain waves, and that those changes go between awake and asleep, and then between the different layers of sleep, whether you're in stage 1, 2, 3, 4, or REM sleep. And so when we go from these types of subjects into subjects where we have multiple definitions and we have issues where we're trying to figure out what does that actually look like, what is the physical manifestation of that, like with motivation and discipline. There are multiple definitions of motivation and discipline, just like there are multiple definitions of altruism and attention. And this is due to this being a new field of study. It's been studied for decades. The issue is that we're dealing with something that has a physical basis, like sleep, to something that comes from the mind. The mind is incredibly complex, and we start with different researchers studying different parts of it. So maybe the 3 different definitions, and I'm just making up that number, but the 3 different definitions of motivation are all capturing a different aspect of motivation. So all 3 need to be put together to actually get to what motivation really is. Or maybe one of them has something in there that isn't really motivation. Maybe it's like self-interest or something else. It doesn't really belong in the definition. So figuring out what belongs and what doesn't is very complex. And given that scientists who dedicate their lives to that topic haven't sorted it out and agreed yet, I don't think we'll see an agreement in the near future. Then we have the issue of physical manifestations. What does motivation look like? No. Maybe somebody who's really going after their goals. Maybe that's it. Or maybe it's someone who woke up early on the day they had something to do. Or maybe that was stress. Maybe they weren't motivated, they were stressed and they were afraid of punishment. Could be. It's difficult to figure that out. So if we have all these problems, why am I talking about this now? Why talk about motivation and discipline if there are so many issues in the understanding of the topics? Well, it comes down to the fact that last night I was watching videos by Greg Doucette. He's a IFBB professional bodybuilder who primarily focuses on fitness videos. So how to gain muscle, lose fat, and how to eat to achieve those goals. However, he had a video pop up where he was talking about motivation and David Goggins. And I thought that was interesting. David Goggins had a very interesting interview on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he's definitely someone you should look into if you haven't heard of him already. But Greg Doucette is making the argument in this video that motivation is genetic, or is at least mostly genetic. And that's an interesting topic. That is a really interesting idea because we can't really ever know. And why is that? Well, when we're talking about things like genetics and we want to know if something is caused by something, we need to do causal research. We need to do an experiment where we have control over the variables. So we have to have an independent variable that we're controlling to see if it affects it. And so what would the independent variable be in that type of study? Well, it would be the genetics. Can we change people's genetics? Not ethically, at least. Maybe we could do some gene modification, but we can't ethically go in and say, we're going to take these 10 people and change these genes in them and see what happens to their motivation. We can't do that. And so we'll never actually know, at least probably not. Who knows what will happen with gene editing in the future, but we probably won't ever know if motivation is the primary component, or rather if genetics is the primary component in motivation. And we're just going to have to live with that. And that's unfortunate. I do think it's safe enough to say that in a similar way to the nurture-nature debate that genetics probably plays a role in your motivation, but it probably doesn't play all of it. There are probably other factors like the environment that relate to it, or so the people you're around and what you learned and what your goals are. And so since we can't really ever know exactly what causes people to be motivated, at least in terms of genetics, we could do causal studies on other things. But since we won't ever know for genetics, I think the best course is not to worry about it. So what if genetics makes up some component of your motivation and your ability to be motivated? In my time teaching in primary education and as a teaching assistant now, and in my time swimming and competing and studying, I have yet to see a person who, if you took something that they didn't really want to do, but you showed them that it was the best way to achieve their goal, I've yet to see them not carry through on it. Now, maybe that's just a lack of experience on my part. But I say, take care of what you need to do. Make sure that you have goals and that you're specific in your goals, that you know what they are, you know when you're going to achieve them, and you can measure your progress towards them. And then go find out what you have to do it. If you care about that goal, you'd better, because goals take a lot of effort. But if you care about that goal, you are going to be willing to put in the time to achieve whatever prerequisite hoops you have to jump through to achieve that goal. So don't worry too much about your genetics playing a role in your motivation or limiting you. Do what you can to link your goals with what you have to do, and then work harder. Keep going until you've mastered whatever it is that is preventing you from achieving that goal, and you should have plenty of motivation that way. At least that's what I do. So hopefully this has been interesting for you. If it has, go ahead and let me know down below. Until next time, cheers.